Hello, everyone. This is Trace Crow with another episode of Doomer Optimism Podcast. Today, we have a special treat. We've got a first-time co-host, Glen Ganaway, and we've also got Carol Sanford, who's going to be our special guest today. So without further ado, Glen, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here among this cadre. What a group. I don't know. I'm 58. I have a homestead I'm rebuilding in Vermont. I work as a account clerk for a union. I am ordained in two different systems, and I'm really big in integral theory. So that's a little bit of background about me. And I got a BS in healthcare management. And I'm interested in all things that we've been talking about here. So jazzed since I found this community. Once I did, and I began listening to what you guys were saying, the first person that I thought of, that the only, and a very short list that I wanted y'all to meet was somebody that I admire a great deal, and that is Carol Sanford. I'm going to say one thing about Carol Sanford. Carol, because she can talk for herself. Carol is often called a positive contrarian, bringing old practices into modern practice. But most importantly, Carol offers businesses and their stakeholders a pathway to extraordinary results. So with that, I'll say welcome to Doomer Optimism, Carol Sanford.
Thank you, Glenn. That was fun. It's always interesting to hear what people pick up on in your life and what touches them. So I was listening for where do we overlap? And I love that you're an account clerk in a union. That to me is so meaningful in terms of what happens with people in day-to-day life, whether they're in a union or not. They're in a workplace that is right now keeping most people pretty unhappy. 70% of people say they aren't at all excited about going to work and would stay home if they could still figure out how to pay the bills. So when I heard you say that, I thought, that's a world I love. I work a lot with, have over the years with unions and everything from paper plants to chemical plants to grocery stores. And so thank you for that little piece of information.
Tell us, I'll take the first question. Tell us how you found us and what is, how you think about the term that we're using, doomer optimism. What do you think of? How does that land with you as a term? It's very new.
Yeah, I'm actually didn't find you. You found me. And I couldn't figure out who you were. I went and listened a little bit and I thought, okay, I like that these people have an authentic way of conversation. They're not trying to position themselves in some way for a certain kind of number of impressions and likes. So I thought, but why in the world would they want to talk to me? And so the term itself was very curious because, as you said, my grandfather is who coined the name positive contrarian. And because from a very, very young age, I disagreed with almost everything all the adults around me, not the way they believed and worked, not the usual way where I was a kid just fighting back because I wanted my freedom. I couldn't literally make sense of it. I had a father who was incredibly racist, a mother who was mentally ill. And so she interpreted things in ways that a paranoid schizophrenic does. And so for me, there is a need to be optimistic. And for me, the positive contrarian is similar to the doomer optimism because there's we're all going to die, and I may be sooner than others. One never knows. But if we can look at, in some ways, the gift we're given of a body for an unknown period of time and come be as present as we can, we don't live with the doom and gloom side, but the doom and possibility. And that's what I heard from what I saw with your name. Is that fit or did I make all that up? You're muted.
All right. Yeah, that's actually no, that's a perfect summation of it. Is the idea for us is, a lot of people come to doomer optimism or gravitate towards this statement, coming from an idea of like, we're facing a myriad of kind of both existential and almost cultural crises at the same time.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that, there of course is a lot of doom that comes with that. There's a lot of sense of angst and frustration and fear and grief, frankly, sadness, right? Is
Yeah.
what we thought our lives were going to be is not going to be. And from that, though, is what many of us come from. We have an optimistic view of that, saying that, like, well, systems can't change until the existing system loosens its grip a bit, right? And that can seem apocalyptic at the time that it's happening. But that loosening of the grip is what enables new things to flower and come out of it, right? Just as things must die and decay in order for new life to be born. And we're all keenly feeling that we're living through a period like that could be centuries, decades, it could be just a few years, right? But we're definitely going through one of those transitional periods. And we have all chosen to act on that rather than, kind of give into the fear, give into the sense of doom or nihilism. Instead, let's give birth to whatever's coming next, right? Try and shape that.
There's one thing you said I kept going to add. I kept thinking you were going to go one more step. You didn't go. Let me go there.
Yeah.
When you talk about the world, the systems around us are insane. Absolutely. And I write about it in my books. And it does have to release its grip. But we have to release our grip. We can't even see how attached we are, how much we fabricate stories to explain why we stay in the current system, how our own identity gets all wrapped up in them. And so, as Pogo said in the comic strip, we admit the enemy and he is actually us. So we got a lot of work to do on us too. Does that still fit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that fits in perfectly. I mean, many of the responses are initially to fix yourself, right? To initially look at yourself. Glenn, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your homestead project. But homesteaders are a whole suite of people that are involved in the Doomer Optimism Project. It's not a homesteading club, but there is a lot of homesteaders, and that's kind of been the initial spark. Grow your own food, make your own value-add products, get to know your neighbors and become rooted in place, right? Those are some of the central things that have come up as at least like kind of lightning rods, like kind of, forming kind of hypotheses about how we might find a pathway forward.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love about my homestead is that's actually on the main street in the town I live in. We have 4 acres, but we have half of it is on the literal main street. Everybody goes by, and we have a classic house that we had to take down, and everybody knew and was asking for it to take down, but it's been an icon in this town for 200 years. In fact, the surrounding 300 acres used to be managed from my homestead. And so it's dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. So everybody knows my business.
Wow.
Everybody knows my business, drives by my house, knows exactly what's going on until things get grown up and we're able to do something about it. And so Trace and us, this brings me to what I think you're really good at, and that is building the solutions that Trace was saying. How do we build this community? What do we need? And you saying, how do we learn to see with eyes that are accurate about what we're looking at, and how to build upon something. Something isn't decaying, something is coming forth. To be able to learn to see differently. So I call this, and what I love about this and the way I've seen your work being used is a lot of leadership training. And it's self leadership is to decide that you're going to take on this task and be one of these principles in regenerative life, be one of these leaders.
Can I take apart what you said? Because I need to disagree with quite a few things, augment a few others, and maybe throw something else on top. So I don't build solutions. I build capability, which is the number one thing, because I use the term regeneration and have for 40, well, 50 something years. My grandfather was part Mohawk, as you probably read part of my story in that book, The Regenerative Life. And what he taught me is core to the coming next era, next evolution, whether that's from a homestead or the center of a city, which we have no control over. It's going to be based on people switching from one paradigm to another. Now, that term's thrown around a lot. People say, well, we're working from a new paradigm. Rarely are they. Let me describe what that means, because I think it is the new light, and none of it has solutions in it. I have no best practices. I ask you not to trust me, not to do anything I tell you, because the work really is, and you did use one term, which is self-developing, or a version of that. I believe that we're in a lot of trouble because we've switched epistemologies. And that's a term basically means how we learn, how we know. And we've given up that we know or could figure it out, or as Bob Dylan said, we don't trust ourselves. You know, his wonderful song about, don't ask me, everything I know is falling apart. Trust yourself. But that has to be a developed self, a self that learns how to manage your own thinking and your own behavior and your own assumptions and all those things that go on. So I don't do any training. That word has no meaning to me except for my dogs and cats. I try and do a little training with them. But with humans, I believe we have a capacity, not yet a capability, to be able to learn from ourselves, from our experience in community, like a community you're seeking to build. And when you do that, you're likely to find place-sourced ideas. Now, I say that slowly and carefully because most people talk about place-based. And I think place-based is us like a human animal landing on top of something we don't understand, making our own, manipulating it, rather than coming to speak the language of the place we are. And I do a lot of work with my colleagues at Regenesis who do story of place. And then inside of that story, we have a message that is eternal. You know, the place each of you live in, I don't think you're in the same location. Right. You each have a story of the place where you are. And so, Glen, when you build your homestead, your business, and your life force energies, it has to be nested in the place that you're in. And I think that's how we actually create the next evolution. Not with generic ideas. I write a book and I speak and I prove to you an expert and I have research and says everybody should do this. That's the problem we've got right now. We've been making everything generic. So yes, everything you were saying, but I have a different tilt on it.
I appreciate the focus on capacity.
Yeah.
Right? Because diversity, because we often I've had to teach myself to learn to look and appreciate diversity. Like
yeah.
In weeds and plants and trees, it all's got to be happening in the forest in order for you to call it a forest and for the forest to work and do its work of regenerative. So diversity, even diversity I don't understand. It's like, why is that there? Because I don't understand it is like, isn't a reason to remove it. It's a reason to ask more questions and become more curious. You know, so with that idea, I use, and I try to think about, you're kind of well known in my circles, my little integral circles, for these 7 principles.
Okay.
You know, so could you talk to us about the 7 principles at all?
Of course. And they're called the 7 first principles.
7 first principles.
And the reason for that is, and I've used that term for a long time before Elon Musk introduced it in kind of a sloppy way into the world, like it was some problem-solving model. Anyway.
I wanted to get you to say that. Thank you.
You're welcome. It works. You tricked me. So first principles really is, goes back to what is the most foundational thing we think we know. And it's important to think we know, because otherwise we get attached to our certainty. There is a way to look at these 7 first principles, which we contrast with our current doomer versions, right? The versions that are taking us into a ditch. And I do that in the book, and we'll see if I can do them all in a short enough period of time here.
There's not going to be a test, Carol. There's not
good. No, I wasn't worried about remembering. The timing of getting them out is pretty long usually. All right.
We get to.
All right. There's a great story or great quote by Albert Einstein that says, don't try and create the new world, which you're talking about, Trace, using the old mind. And I've paraphrased it so it fits a way I think is more what he meant. And how do I know what he meant? I know what he meant because I know a man who was in the room with him at Princeton when he explained it. And I've written quite a bit about it. Einstein didn't answer the question in many public forums. He did with his physics students. And the person who told us in a classroom at UC Berkeley, where I was an undergraduate and a graduate for a little while. And he said, what Einstein always told us is and by the way, I was also studying with Thomas Kuhn at the same time at Berkeley, who wrote The Structure of the Scientific Revolution. Do you know that book?
Yes, I do.
All right. And Kuhn was an amazing man. He had just published that book during the 2 years he was a visiting scholar there. And we used to go sit in this place on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley where we, you drank a beer and you talked like we're talking here. You kind of talk philosophy. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I learned from Kuhn was that people had paradigms. So I also heard Albert Einstein describe that there were 2 ways. Einstein said if you wanted the old Newtonian view or the quantum view, you got to understand that there are whole different pictures you have in your mind. One is if you want the Newtonian view, the physical world, the rocks and water and trees and things that are manifest that our senses can pick up. If you work only from the world Newton gave us, you're working from what he called a billiard ball. I think he meant pool table view, because, pool tables have pockets in them. And that was what he was describing. He said, if you are a Newtonian, the old paradigm, you will see a pocket you think is the one people should get in. In fact, you'll design the pockets, maybe even build a table that you tell everybody you have to go to this pocket, this one, and you know who the players are on the table you want to move into that. And they're the cue balls. And then you got a cue stick and you are the god of the cue stick and you can hit the ball into the pocket. And that's your work in the world. You're supposed to define the solutions, define where people need to move and do the work, define the holy grail, the best practices of where people go in there. And he said, that's actually a lie. That's not the way the world works. And we know with Heisenberg and other things in quantum that whatever you think you direct, it doesn't go there. Nope. A bunch of other stuff moves. And you keep saying, I'll get them next time. You get another story. He said, what we have to switch to, and this is necessary for the 7 first principles, we have to get to the view of a matrix in which a baby is born. The baby we cannot control. We can't say, go be this, be that, this color eyes, this level of intelligence, this place in the world. We create a matrix, and we, it's mostly women who are growing that matrix, but they're in a matrix also, in a culture with partners and spouses. And so their job becomes to keep the matrix for the baby healthy so its capacity can select its own definition, its own direction, and then we follow that. That's what Einstein meant. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to raise children.
Yeah, it's a very good way because we try and instead, good boy, good girl, rewards, incentive, my seventh book is about the nonsense of behaviorism, which is a pool table psychology. All right. So I developed a Newtonian view of first principles and a quantum view. The quantum view, and I'm going to say it in a little story, and then we'll come back and look at each one just a little bit.
Okay.
My grandfather uses a phrase that reminds me of David Bohm, who wrote Wholeness in the Implicate Order. I can tell you're a philosopher, man after my own heart. He said, the problem we have right now is we see things as fragments. We can't see them as a whole. When we look at a tree, we don't see treeness. And as you said, forest farms, it's got work to do. It's engaged, and each tree in there is a member of the family. What we do instead is we see leaves and what we'll do with them, or how they'll, like biomimicry says, go copy them. Well, that's seeing it as a thing, seeing it as roots and branches, and not as a living part of a nested system. So number one first principle is work with wholes. And wholes, in order to do that, like with the child, so we'll stick with the child story, most of us don't see our children as a whole. We see them as problems they have, or what they're good at here, or what they're bad at, and we go around trying to fix them instead of seeing that child. And I'll give you the next term now, seeing that child as having its own essence, its own creation of who it is and what it can be, it's becoming, what it aspires to. Well, we always have to see it in a value-adding process. And that adding is ing, not value added, which people have done to a term my colleagues helped create. So we have a child as a whole being who has an essence. Now that you think about it, and do you have children, Trace and Glenn?
I don't.
You don't. You were a child, though.
Yes, and I've helped raise children, but I don't have children.
Yeah. So if we see the child as a whole, the only way we can do that is see what the essence of their way of being is in a value-adding process, not sitting here taking a test and getting graded or being affirmed or denied and punished by their parents, but going at it as a value-adding process with their essence doing its own work. So first principle, work with whole. Secondly, reveal essence and work from essence. Third principle, now that you can see essence, you can see their potential uniquely in the situation at this point in their life, because potential isn't an abstraction. It is specific to a place, a person, a situation, a value-adding process. So the first three principles are work with wholes, understand their essence, and then help develop that potential. Now, the opposite side, Newtonian, those are all quantum. And I've got quantum physicists who I cite through the book. On the Newtonian side, you start with your principle, which is not first, is fragmentation. It's the opposite of whole. You chop it up, put it in pieces. The opposite of essence is category or typology. You're one of a type, or I don't even, I try and keep forgetting all the terms, but, they have things like big person thinking or small person, or detail versus, and then there's the Enneagram, somebody destroyed this very sacred instrument in the Middle East for centuries, and you put it into typologies and say, you're one of these. No, that instrument is about transformation of each person. Then instead of moving to potential from essence, you move instead to problem. So we don't, every process we have nowadays says, start with the problem. Well, that's because you've fragmented and you're now got types. And so people don't fit in the box. Mm-hmm. So if you got categories and you want everybody to fit in it, I have so many friends who are mixed race now and say it's so much fun when they get a form and they draw a line through everything. Yeah, I'm not, one of a color or one of a type or one of some lineage people think. So we got the first three principles, right? We have a choice between see the child as a whole or see them fragmented in terms of the parts and pieces, their grades, their social skills. And that's how parents talk about their kids. And, or we can see their essence, like my essence is, and there aren't perfect words for this. I do this work with all my CAD change agent members, help them reveal this essence, which was probably born with them. But to give you a hint of what it sounds like, I have a couple of aspects of my own essence. One which is disrupt certainty. Do everything you can to not have people be certain. And so to throw them off course, right? And the other is develop self. And I mean that even including a nation develop itself. So we have wholes with essence and potential compared to fragmentation, topology, categorization, and problem solving. Mm-hmm. Now, there are four more, right? If you can count, you're probably up with me. I want to keep the picture alive, though, because otherwise these become abstract.
I know, because we're going to talk about some of the leadership styles, too.
No, we're not. There's no such thing.
Okay.
I mean...
So finish the four principles. Finish the last four.
All right. If you know a child more of what's essence and potential, now you can develop that. It's not something we're born incomplete. We have to be developed to be of any use, not only to the world, but to ourselves. So, fourth principle is develop potential and essence for each whole being, right? So each of us needs development, and all my membership communities are all about development. And they're everything from self out to planetary processes. Now, fifth principle, with our child, we want them to be able to see themselves nested in something, nested in place, nested in family, nested in probably some spiritualizing process or community. Because none of us are, as John Dunn said, an island to ourselves. Mm-hmm. We are all nested, and we all have a role to play in that nest. But it also has to be developed, because most of us do a Newtonian view, which is flat land. Everything is the same as everything else. You get yours and get as much of it as you can, because it's all the stuff for your kit, right? And so if a child learns to see themselves nested in a place and in a community and in a worldview, then they can become someone who contributes. And if they don't, they're lost. Mm-hmm. They don't know what their meaning is, where you get it from context and having a role, right? The sixth first principle, that's hard to say, sixth first principle, is nodal, Nodal. What we tend to do is try and set priorities, leverage things. People are always saying to me, you can't scale what you do because you have development conversations. You got to get in courses and package it. And I said, nope, that wouldn't change anything. You think scaling is what makes things change. No, it's actually changing one thing that changes everything else. And what you change that in my worldview, I don't know what yours would be, but it's capability to manage self, to use critical thinking skills, and to do that in communities of people. If I work in communities who are committed, and like I've got a few thousand members in my communities, that 2,000 is changing so much so fast, and none of it's about me scaling what I do. I'm not that grand. I need people who can be thinking for themselves. So we've got 6 first principles. Let me review them. So we go to the last one. So you start with a whole, not a fragment. You then go to the essence of that whole as it works in the world, not a category or a type of person or style. There are no styles, right? That's categorization. And then that has potential, which can be developed and understood in a context of a nested system. That gives us the possibility to see what acupuncture act can we take that moves everything. You know acupuncture?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know the way it works is you put a needle in here and a needle here and your whole body heals. And so that's a nodal intervention. Now, what you have to hold all that together is a field, an energy field. And that's a weird term, except Einstein, this bright man, said everything is energy. Matter is the only thing that's slowed down enough that our undeveloped, limited senses can pick it up. But if you learn to see energies, well, if you go into a party and you're late, you can feel that there's a field there. You can feel there's a field of joy, or a feel there are some people who are really upset and, you know, something's going on. You don't know the content. You go to a baseball game and you can feel a field of energy. So learning how to develop and build or recreate, we don't build them, they're there. We regenerate fields. It's the 7th principle. And my grandfather, his major work with me was walking through woods and streams and teaching me to engage with energies. The other end of that one is transactional. If we don't do that, we work with energies, we become transactional. So 7 first principles.
That's great. And I just dumped a whole lot on you, Trace, you know, but I think you could see like the parallels of why of exactly what the way that Carol speaks to these exact same things. It's like the development and the movement and the the catalyst change. I'd love to see how that you react to this.
Yeah, me too.
Well, when you were talking, it reminded me of something that one of the podcast founders, Jason Snyder, tweeted, and I'm going to mangle it, but essentially he was pondering how amazing it is that a seed, right, a tree seed, has all of the requirements it needs to terraform its environment to what it can survive. Everything it needs is right there in that little seed. And it kind of, that's what my mind was going to immediately when you're talking about it, is that like a child is born into this world as a whole being. And now it's our job to do our best to shepherd what that being is into the matrix that they're born into. Just as a seed falls where it lands, right? It lands where it lands. And now it must either thrive where it is or not thrive or grow into whatever it can be. And I just find that to be enormously
so can I disagree with you?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't think the seed or the baby, the fetus, have everything they need. They are in a nested system.
Sure.
And without the healthy matrix, they have nothing to draw on. The key is we don't get to tell it. We don't get to tell the seed what it does, or the fetus, or the sperm and egg coming together.
Right.
But they are together what creates the outcome. But each self, I mean, the reason I talk about self-determining is because if we don't, we assume our job is to do it the way it should be. The matrix doesn't decide, the forest doesn't decide, but together they entangle and create something.
Yeah.
And I like the way you remind us that if you can find yourself in a transactional activity, you can actually switch it to the other principle.
The field, the energy field.
The reality. You could move to the reality of the situation and maybe make a better decision. Right?
Yeah. Probably if someone's also working on capability to do all that. In the case of humans, we're so poorly developed. We want to change the field and we don't know how. And What I've done for 47 years with my work is teach organizations how to make all that change in a way that's actually pretty fast. And the good news is, because they're in business, my clients grow about 35 to 65% in revenue per year. Would you like to have a business like that? And you reduce your footprint on the planet and our resources by how you do that. So I just want people to know I'm not a pie in the sky thinking people should magically do good things and the world will be good. Nope. It actually turns out is much more effective way to create change.
Right. It isn't a really hippy dippy idea to change
No.
to try to work at changing where change is most effective.
Right.
In the field and not in a transactional relationship. So
right.
That translates into policy. It translates into what you even plant,
yeah.
in your garden. So it has so many effects. That's why I love thinking about this. Oh, so what principle am I working with?
Yeah.
And when something goes wrong, can I find where I've slipped into another way of thinking? I've slipped back into not appreciating somebody for who they are, but only for what they could do for me.
Right.
That's where the problem is. It isn't that the transaction isn't going well. It's that I've got my relationship stuck in a way of thinking, And so I think that's a lot of what Doomer optimism tries to do is shift our way of seeing the world so that the path or the next thing to do becomes evidently clear. Like no argument, grow food, or that kind of thing. Recycle, regenerative, all those things. What sees becomes interesting to do, and then the nested in place needs to start to happen, and then go ahead.
You know what gets in the way of that?
Tell us.
Ego.
Yeah.
Right. So we look at all you were just talking about. We think we know the answer, and then we project that onto this would be good for you, and then we go take over a land and colonize it and create war and throw out all the stuff they were going toward. So you're absolutely right. If we are in the right state, have created the right field, all of us together can see what's needed. And you need a little development of capability and a few what I call frameworks, living system frameworks. So you're looking through the right lenses, but otherwise we're in trouble. Now, you want to talk about leadership styles. What in the world are you talking about?
Regenerative roles.
Oh, that's not even remotely the same thing.
I knew you, as soon as I said it, I knew, but that's, I look at these, I look at these roles as leaders in my own, way of looking at them.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
And the reason is that it puts you back in the Newtonian mindset of defining what the pockets are and how you become a good cue stick and a generous worker with cue balls on the table to get them in what's good for them. I don't believe there are leaders. And I think as soon as we get rid of that term and all the training for them, I convert everyone I don't do anything. I build capability of people to see an alternative. Which is moving anyone who was in a previous leadership role, leadership position, into what I call a resource, RE-SOURCA. Now, I talk about that in this book
yes, you do.
Holding up every so often. And it means to return people to themselves as the source. And I don't mean you become God over everybody. I mean, you're in charge of your own decisions, your own reaction, your own development. But you can, if you love other people enough. And I love the word love, right? Because I mean karatos, the Greek word, which means the love for which there is no opposite, which is probably where the term unconditional love came from, but no one ever credits the Greek language. And it means that kind of love, karatos, means you develop people to express their own essence. And it means you don't ever give them advice or mentoring or coaching because that's you projecting onto them. What you do is to give them capability to trust themselves. And they won't be able to at the very beginning. They'll have whoops, I just lost my. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you
Okay,
fine.
good. I have big ears, I guess. We lose track of that. Our work is to grow our children to know themselves, to grow our spouses and friends and life partners and neighbors. What would it be like if every time we saw something we thought they shouldn't be doing, instead of telling them, we said, let's learn together about a subject. And that subject turned out indirectly, which was my last book, to really give them capability to come up with a better solution, one better than you would have ever thought of. So resource is the term I use that keeps us in a quantum, not Newtonian billiard model.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that distinction, which is why you called them regenerative roles.
Yeah.
In the book, several of them, and I'm not going to ask you to do much, but I do want Trey to hear these 7 or the regenerative roles that you lay out.
9 of them.
9 of them. There's there's the parent, the regenerative parent, the regenerative designer role, earth tender, the citizen role, the entrepreneur role, the economic shaper role, the regenerative educator role, the regenerative media content creator role, and the regenerative spirit resource role. So I wanted you to give an opportunity to see if any of those jumped out at you.
Well, I want to tell you where they came from.
Please.
And also why they're in sets of 3. You read them. Most people don't. You read them in sets of 3. So this came about from, again, all the work. My grandfather's been dead 65, 70 years, 65 years. So even me, about to be 80 years old in a couple of weeks, I've known about these. And my grandfather described what it took to recreate a nation, and Mohawk. He was part Mohawk after diminishment. So this is appropriate to Doomer optimism. You needed 9 roles, was believed, and there were 3 sets of them in order to regenerate a society. And then those 9 roles have to be played ongoingly, not by a person. Everyone plays all of them, probably. I played most of them. I'm a media content creator. I'm an educator at universities and corporations. I'm not a real good earth tender because I kill things. But anyway, you learn to play all 9, right. And they come in 3 sets. The first one are the people who are the initiators, activators. So that's why parent is there. A parent is about, at the birth, whatever, as you said, however we raise children, determines the society we have. The designer creates the idea about how something will come into existence. They don't bring it into existence usually, they design it. And earth tender is the same way. How we tend to or don't tend to earth determines the home we get to live on and all species get to live on. So those activators, you can see why if you want to rebuild a society, you need parenting, not always of children, but the management of the birthing in the matrix. Now, there are the manifestors on the outside, and I have a picture in my head. To hold up the book so they can see the picture of the cover, right? So this is called the Enneagram, but not the modern popular version of it. Just please don't associate it with that. Yeah, there you go. Oh, upside down. I like that. That's very good. All right, so you have the initiators and then you have the manifestors. So citizens are the one who govern, or if we woke up, we could. Right now, we are pretty passive. Entrepreneurs are the one who initiate a better economic system. Again, they could if they woke up. And I wrote one book just for entrepreneurs. And then the third of that triad is economic shapers. And I've written a bunch of articles about that on Medium, what a regenerative economy would look like. So they manifest things in the world. Then there are the people who give conscious shocks. They bring in energy. And those are the educators, if they understood their work was building intelligence, not good test takers. So educators is one of the spirit resources which should be disruptive. I call them all the disruptors. The second disruptor is media content creator. And media, if it knew what its work was, one of my forwards is written by Tanya Mosley, who is the Here and Now media host on NPR radio. And Tanya is this beautiful African-American woman, inside and out, who I've known since she was much younger. And I still listen to all her podcasts. I don't usually talk to her about them. But she was very excited when she realized her job is to actually promote hope. Mm. And how often does media content creator give hope? That's, to tell you the truth, your word, doomer optimism was the hope thing that drew me to say yes, to come with you. And then the third disruptor role is the spirit resource, to be able to spiritualize the world we live in. It's so meaningless. And with jobs have no meaning, relationships have none, our output often has no meaning. How do you spiritualize things? And so those are the 9 roles my grandfather taught me. And I did this as a, what do we call it? Action research project. So I had 160 people go test all this and play with it and evolve it and help me have the right language and the right process. And so their stories are woven all the way through the book, and their reflections, we have a half of them at least in the front of the book as testimonials to the process. So there you go. 7 first principles, the regenerative life, and 9 roles to help make it stay happening.
I see these roles acting out on Twitter. I see these roles acting out in the market, or like in the marketplace, or in, and so how did that land for you, Trace?
Well, I mean, I think that if we had the time, I'd like to have you sit here, Carol, for the next 4 hours. You basically every 30 seconds you've said something I'd like to interrogate for about 30 minutes. Not in a negative way, as in like, oh man, she's cracking things open inside of me. As a, I am a co-owner of a business. There's only 4 of us that are in the business. And we're, we operate very much like a matrix, right? It's actually been very difficult for us to, take my MBA training and try and create the org chart for what we are. And really it's very difficult because it's the 4 of us, right? And definitely people have strengths that the business needs to move forward in certain areas. But it's also like, as a, I love the idea of a resource, because I've been really trying to, this is really top of mind for me, because I've been trying to rethink, retabolize the way I operate in the business. Because I've found myself sort of regularly getting in the way, and it's because of ego. It's because the sense that I have to do something. I'm the one who has to complete this project, instead of, what's really resonated with me is this idea that like, oh no, everyone else on my team has their own essence and their own potential. And if I'm in the way, they can't, that's blocking off that node in the matrix, right? I'm in the way. They can't, I need to get out of the way and let them start to operate. See, and that's actually where I wanted you, where the question really is like, could you kind of speak more on that? As someone who's trying to transition from a leader to a resource, someone who is going to help channel the energy that goes through a business, right? How what are some practical steps? Obviously.
So I don't get practical steps, and let me tell you why. then I'm being the cue ball, or excuse me, the cue stick, putting you in a pocket. And, but first I want to tell you, get a copy of the Regenerative Business, book number 3. Is full of stories about how I built this and what the phases are you go through. Generally, I'm going to tell you at a very high level that you quit thinking about what you do and don't get out of the way. Get into a developmental process with everyone. When I go into a company, I meet with them at least 3 or 4 days a week and sometimes 5 a month in learning to think differently. I don't, inside of any of that, tell you where the pockets are on the billiard ball table, but you begin to see them. You begin to create your own together. And if you got out of the way, you pulled a major energy source for the co-creative process, for the entanglement process. You want all of you learning a new way to think again. I'm about to do, well, I just did an Australian workshop yesterday, and I gave them a set of principles and premises for how you run a business. And basically, number 1 was, and that's what we're going to get to today, move everything from being externally determined to intrinsically determined. You don't have any competencies on your list that everybody has to meet. You don't have any rules or hierarchy. I'm so glad you can't graph it. That's wonderful. But knowing everyone having their role, which they choose, you do tie everyone. I guess number 2, you stop managing people from outside and teach them to manage from inside. Number 2, you connect everyone to the stakeholders. That's book number 1. Connect all people to the stakeholders and the community, the customers, the suppliers, and you grow their lives. And with all of you growing all their lives, you all grow. And then it'll tell you more in there than I can do very well in a short time about how to rethink, reimagine, re-inspirit. I can't remember what all your reads were. Rethink.
Yeah.
There's a start.
Yeah. It starts
That's beautiful.
Here.
Yeah. Well, we're coming close to the end of the hour, but I wanted to give you a chance, Carol, to just kind of any last words, any kind of parting bits of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to the doomer optimists out there.
Well, I don't have any illusion that I have something you don't already know inside. What I'm good at is giving you language for it, a framework to be able to see it, and stories to give you hope that it's possible. If you'd like more of that, I have a website, carolsanford.com. It's all about me. And you can there find all my books, I run a podcast, Business Second Opinion, where I critique Harvard Business Review and its ilk and give you a better alternative to any article they publish. So there's a lot of stuff. Most of it's free or cheap. I do have a couple of communities people join, and people have been with me for decades because I never, ever once do the same thing twice. I have no PowerPoint I've ever done twice, no paper, no handout. You keep growing and learning, and I hope that for all of you.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Carol, for joining us today. Thank you, Glenn. You did a tremendous job for your first time hosting. Well, definitely, y'all are both welcome back. I think there's probably lots more we could discuss, Carol. I definitely want to read The Regenerative Business, and then maybe I can bring you back and we can talk about the book a little more in depth.
Yes.
Glenn got what he wanted, I think. Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Carol. Everyone have a great rest of the evening.
Have a good day.